Welcome back to another episode of Harmonious at Lunch, the show that fuels your business success. I'm Brandon Gano, your host and guide through the world of harmonious business growth. Today, we're unlocking powerful strategies with industry experts to help your business thrive. If you're a business owner, entrepreneur, or executive, you are in the right place. Join me and our incredible guests today on the journey to clarity, growth, and success. It is time to revolutionize your approach to business. Let's dive in with another episode of Harmonious at Lunch. Welcome back into some more bite-sized business advice. And today's episode, I think, is going to be fascinating just talking to our guests before we started recording here. And the topic is Dante's Inferno and the quest for entrepreneurial immortality. I don't know about you as a listener, but I do not put Dante's Inferno in the category of a business book or a business-themed anything. So I'm excited to unpack this with you over the next 15 minutes or so. So let me welcome our guest, Alexander Concepcion. Welcome to the show, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So Dante's Inferno and business. You know, I went to business school, and I was never assigned that book in any of my business classes. So you gotta break this down for me.
Yeah,
right off the bat, I don't really see the link.
Great. Yeah. Largely Dante's Inferno and Renaissance overall is this process of humanization, of highlighting the human experience of life. And business school, which I also went to, is the process of like separating the human experience from entrepreneurship, where you learn about formulas and business jargon and things that are relevant for Fortune 500 companies. But in that entire educational experience, the human experience gets lost.
So boring, isn't it? Terrible. Yeah, I don't advise anybody else to go, by the way.
Yeah, I burned my college diplomas, and I learned business by starting my own business. And going back to Dante's, first, it's this process of first seeing entrepreneurship as a human first experience. And what Dante's Inferno is about is this journey through hell on the way to paradise. And in the business sense, the reality is most of us don't make it. Most entrepreneurs don't make it. Most businesses fail, and you never find out why. Like what I was saying before, people who crash their businesses don't do podcast tours to explain why they messed up. So all these stories of people going through intense trauma and awful things happening, you never hear about. It's this massive survivor's bias. So in the same way, Dante's Inferno presents all these reasons and layers of how people wind up in hell. I wanted to understand why entrepreneurs fail. Why do businesses die? And it's the same process of dissecting business from the external world, the world we don't control, the internal world, the world we do control, and ultimately ourselves and our own relationships with our businesses. There's so many layers to dissect of how things go wrong and why they don't, and why things go wrong, and what can we understand from these stories and lessons and frames. So that's the arc of my book.
Yeah, it's really interesting you say that too. I have a very limited data set here, but on this podcast in particular, we did have one guest, and his name is escaping my mind at the moment. It was probably about 200 episodes or so ago, where he was on a podcast tour to share the story of how he failed in business and what he learned about it. He came on this show. He actually had a podcast about just that and wanted to interview more people who had the same scenario. But this is episode 351. So one guest out of 351, you talk about the survivor bias. I think it's very true. And then we're left to kind of pick up the pieces as entrepreneurs and say, okay, what worked for all these other people, these survivor stories that we hear, and how can I apply that to my business? There's very rarely that cautionary tale of what patterns should I avoid? What mistakes can I learn from? So from that perspective, this is a very interesting topic. So diving into the book then and the similarities and the realizations that you had, what are some of the things that stood out for you as you started writing writing the book or going through this process?
Yeah, going back to rehumanizing business, the critical variable in my book is energy. And like for a business, you need kind of three critical elements like money, time, and energy. Like obviously money, because we're not doing nonprofits. You need time to do the things to make the money. But more important than anything else is your human individual energy, because you are the one that powers all the stuff. And if your own human energy evaporates, then everything's going to fall apart because there's nothing to run it anymore. So to me, survival is a choice. It's a choice. Am I going to continue to work on the thing? Am I going to give my human energy to this business or am I not? Because in the reality, businesses don't really fail. It's people just stop giving it energy and then the business dies. So survival is about what makes you keep making the choice to say, yes, I'm going to keep doing this. And so that energy component is, it factors in like the emotional costs, the costs of like stress and anxiety and burnout and all of the human parts that we sacrifice to run our businesses. Because if that thing falls apart, then everything falls apart.
Yeah, how do you kind of determine, and this is you specifically,
Uh,
and maybe even other people that you've talked to or work with, like how do you determine those things that you effortlessly give energy to versus those things that maybe suck your energy? Because I think like the burnout conversation, for example, is to me just a misallocation of your own human resource to the things that drain your energy rather than the things that give you energy. And I think it's different for all of us. It's a unique
yeah.
makeup for everybody, but failing to identify what those two buckets are is really what causes burnout and then business failure ultimately. I'm curious your take on that.
Yeah. Building on that idea, I think it's totally right. I think burnout is so common because we tend to look at business in the business school way, which is very
Mhm.
spreadsheet, numbers, KPIs type orientation. But what you don't see on spreadsheets is your own human energy. Like there's no line item for physical exhaustion or emotional exhaustion. So we treat it as this, as if it's an infinite resource, and it's not. We're just drawing all this human energy from ourselves like infinitely, and then we get surprised of like, oh, how do we run out of that? So I think practically it's important to treat like your own personal human energy as another line item.
Mm.
Because imagine being really profitable and really miserable.
Well, I mean, you don't have to imagine it.
Right.
There's a ton of people doing that.
Yeah. And to me, that's not surviving
No.
because it's not even about the business surviving. It's about you, the entrepreneur, surviving. And I even argue at the end of the book, if you're in a bad relationship with your business, then it's better to shut it down or maybe sell it or do something else or change your relationship with the business. But it's more important that you personally survive, that the energy, like the brilliance and creativity and problem solving version of yourself survives. And if your business has to go for that version of you to survive, then so be it. Because I think there's a lot of people who don't like their businesses. They don't have healthy relationships with their businesses. And they still kind of grit their teeth and keep working on it and keep working on it. When in reality, they're also looking for permission that maybe it's okay to shut it down and move on to something else.
I find that with all levels of the business, employees too. You
Mhm.
go into so at Human Op, we have actually uniquely found a way to add that line item in for the human energy component, and through our algorithm and our analysis, we can tell if someone's either burnt out, on the verge of burnout, or doing things that actually energize them and help them thrive, not just survive. But employees, I think, are even more guilty of this because as entrepreneurs, we are, I like to say, naturally creative, or a little bit more creative than the average employee. And you find that people are just sticking out in jobs and roles that they don't like. They're doing things that burn them out, and they're afraid to say anything because they can't picture the consequences. So in this analogy, I think, that really is hell, right? It's like you're selling your soul for a paycheck.
Yeah.
That's whether you're the entrepreneur or the employee, anywhere in between. It just doesn't make sense to me. And so, now that we're talking about this, the analogy is very real, and I think it's on point what you've done here with your book.
Mhm.
What have the response been from people when they read this, whether it's the entrepreneur, the employee? Um, do people really resonate with this?
Yeah. It's all the feedback that I've gotten has been pretty deep and profound
Hmm.
because I know nothing like this has ever been done, but I think it's so necessary. And since you have, whether people want it or not, more and more people are going to kind of get backed into a corner, and entrepreneurship is going to be the only way out.
Yeah.
So you're going to have a lot of smaller micro businesses, and the smaller business becomes, the more intimate and personal and human it becomes. And that's why I think it's so important to treat entrepreneurship and business as primarily a human experience. I think that's what gets lost.
Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And we need to get back to embracing that part of ourselves too, the human part, and not saying I need to look like somebody else or perform a certain way. Like, truly understanding yourself first is immensely powerful. And I think we've seen this to some degree over the past, I'll say, 2 decades. You look at, I'll use a seemingly crazy example of craft beer, right? I mean, 2 decades ago, craft beer was a thing. It wasn't really the craze that it is today. Now you have microbreweries, you have different labels and brands, and you even have the big companies like Anheuser-Busch creating quote unquote craft beer. It's because locally people wanted to do this thing. They wanted uh, to pour their heart and soul into a product that they loved and then share it with the local economy.
Yeah.
And I think we're getting back to that in a variety of different industries, but it's that human piece. It's this is my take on this thing.
Mhm.
And craft breweries are wildly successful because they're not trying to be Anheuser-Busch. They're just
Yeah.
trying to be themselves. And so I agree with what you're saying, and I hope more people do embrace that. What do you say is that first step? So somebody, let's say someone's hearing this or someone reads your book, and we're both now encouraging them to embrace the human element, start a business, start a micro business, and then see where it goes from there. Understanding everything from the perspective of your book, what is that first step to embrace the human element and put that into their individual business?
Yeah. It's funny that you brought up craft brewery as an example, because one of the people in my book is my cousin who's in the process of opening up his small neighborhood microbrewery
That's
in
crazy.
in Miami, and he's one of the heroes of the book. And he is that kind of person whose brewery is going to be an amazing expression of who he is. And I'm super excited to see it. And I think what's misunderstood or not emphasized enough is the advantage that small individuals have over big mega entities. For example, I've got a small real estate company in Texas called Taco Street Locating, and I it's a business that helps people find apartments, but I'm in a niche where there's much bigger players with much bigger resources, with way more agents, with way more everything that I have. But being alone and having my own brand, my own everything, I actually have a massive advantage because being small lets me create a much more human, intimate experience in a way that bigger players can't. So it's why people love going to the small neighborhood coffee shops where it's a one of one versus Starbucks, because a small player can create a more intimate human experience in a way that big players can't. So I think so just practically being small and not having resources, you can use it to your advantage by being more human, showcasing your personality. That's how I stand out in my business. So one of the chapters in the book is about competition, and I argue that competition is not real in business because in a competition, it's like chess. It's me versus you, and whoever fulfills the rules better or scores more points wins the prize. But in business, it's the customer, the consumer choosing this, say, brewery versus that brewery. So it's the customer that has a choice. They have agency in this decision. So the risk to you as a business owner is not that another business beats you in a game. The risk is that you get replaced, is that someone chooses not you. So it's all about the choice. And what most businesses do is they commoditize. They just copy what everyone else is doing. And this is pretty much every industry. Like, if you just imagine like real estate agents or personal injury attorneys or nail salons, everyone's kind of doing the same thing the exact same way. And what happens when you're the exact same thing as everyone else, then you're a commodity, which means the only thing that differentiates you is price. And I'll argue that a commodity business like that isn't even a business. You're effectively being a freelancer to a market that you don't control, because you don't control pricing anymore. So flipping the idea of a commodity, something that's infinitely replaceable, to something that's irreplaceable, is a monopoly, where you are the one of one. And if you're a monopoly, like, you are the only one. You can't be replaced. And that's why, like, your own humanity is so important, because your individualness can't be replicated and can't be replaced. So that's the one freebie monopoly everyone gets, is your reputation. That's why so many businesses can function just on their reputation alone.
Wow, that's I love episodes of this show that really just make you think deeply and reconsider maybe everything up until this very moment. And I think this episode is uh, nothing but that. That's a really, really interesting perspective that I think myself, I know for sure I'm going to spend some time thinking about that, but you as the listeners too. There's a lot to unpack there in that last, just couple of minutes of what Alexander says about how you structure your business, and how you think about yourself and your relationship with your business. I'm sure the book is jam-packed of thought-provoking statements, just like that one. And I hope more people go get it. So, Alexander, let's end with that question. Where can people find the book? Where can they learn more about you, and take this next step in continuing this conversation?
Yeah, the book is at survivalfirstbook.com. It's on Amazon. There's an audiobook that I personally recorded. So if you want to listen to me talk for 9 hours, like, that's an option. It's in all the available channels. I'm not that hard to contact. So if people read the book and they want to really go deep into this journey with me, then, like, I'm super into it.
I love it. That's fantastic. The link is on the screen, survivalfirstbook.com. It's also down below in the show notes, wherever you're watching or listening, along with more links, social media, and everything else about Alexander and the book. So could definitely go check that out. Let me end with this one question then, because the book and the concept is so big and it's so disruptive. If there were, let's say, someone who's in business and it's not going as smoothly as they thought it would, or at least they wanted it to at the beginning, what would the one thing be that you would want them to get out of reading this book?
Simplify is just the most elegant, effective approach to risk. Simplification is just the process of reducing the surface area of disaster.
I like it. Well, that's amazing, Alexander. Thank you so much for being here. This is a great episode.
Yeah, thank you for hosting me.
For those of you watching, listening, wherever you are, again, links down below in the show notes. We hope you enjoyed this one. We'll see you on tomorrow's episode of Harmonious at Lunch. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Harmonious at Lunch podcast. Make sure you subscribe on whatever platform you're on, and we want to invite you to join us in the Small Business Success Facebook group, our private group where guests and listeners come together to grow your business. We want impact-driven entrepreneurs who are ready to go to the next level in this group so we can all share ideas, collaborate, and grow our businesses together. Go to whatif.com/group, and we want to invite you to join today. See you on the next episode of Harmonious at Lunch.